Hello and welcome to the Creativity Podcast. This is a series where we take a look at how creative people relate to and understand creativity itself. I'm your host, Nick Cook, and with me today is Zach Brashill. Hello, Zach.
Hello.
So Zach is a music producer who's better known as Etch. He produces drum and bass orientated multi-genre electronic music and DJs all over the place. Very, very prolific. So how you doing, Zach?
Yeah, not too bad, man. Can't complain. Well, I don't like the heat.
Yeah.
And it's very hot at the moment. That's my only complaint at the moment. But other than that, yeah, I'm doing all good.
Awesome. So, Zach, what does creativity mean to you? I know it's a huge question, but we'll just start wherever you want and we'll go from there.
Yeah, for sure. So, for me, starting from a young age, I still don't know technically what I want to pursue for my whole life, but I never had any idea, and I really didn't like reality, and that's such a only child thing to say, but I didn't. I was always sort of daydreaming, and as soon as my uncle and my auntie and my mum put me onto films, and then it became video games and eventually music. That was this sort of dream world that I could escape to.
Yeah.
And obviously it's come a long way since that sort of young realization. But I think at its core, creativity for me has always been a way, a healthy way to escape reality.
Yeah.
And it's also become sort of a big part of therapy for me, because I'm a bit too cynical for traditional therapy. So when I get pissed off or any sort of emotion or whatever, knowing that I can have a discipline to go to sort of let it out on is really good, and it really sort of relieves me quite a lot.
Yeah. So it's quite an emotional thing, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it doesn't always have to be. I mean, a lot of the time, sometimes they sort of figure each other out. Sometimes I'll be I just want to make a tune, and I'll be in the middle of putting something together, and that will trigger an emotion. Or sometimes it'll be the other way around. I feel a certain way, I'm going to make this kind of track. A means to escape and a means for self-therapy, I suppose.
Yeah. So it's quite reflective, isn't it? And understanding yourself,
Yeah, definitely. I think the same goes for DJing to a degree as well.
Okay.
Although I've kind of got mixed feelings about DJing these days, but I know that when I got into it, it was a big sort of creative, expressive sort of release.
Yeah, how so?
I think so. When I started DJing, it was very much about having your own sense of identity, behind decks, and I think in building that identity, it's creative in itself, and it's I'm kind of known for mixing things together that shouldn't really fit together, but in a roundabout way, I find a way in, and that in itself is creativity. But I mean, I think DJing is very much, I don't know. I don't want to hate on it too hard. I'll never get booked again. But
yeah, this is probably only going to be listened to by academics. So while you are speaking to the public, I think you're probably safe. So hate away.
Yeah, I think DJing it's very much about keeping 20-year-olds dancing now, and I don't think
wasn't it always that though? Do you think, in a way? Because the audience is number one, every time,
Yeah, to a degree, for sure. I mean, obviously everybody wants to go out and dance and have fun, but that doesn't mean it can't be something that's kind of thought-provoking as well.
True.
Like, I remember, when I started going to raves and like using my fake ID to get into clubs, like, of course it was about the dance and the club and everything, but it felt like a lot of the music was pushing a lot of boundaries that you didn't really know what you were going to get, but that was all good. And it feels like when I go to clubs now, it's like, the lowest common denominator to get people to dance and to make people stay in the main room, rather than,
So
inviting.
how would you inject creativity or something of your own creative personality into that?
I mean, as a DJ, it's nowadays it's gotten harder, and I hold my hands up. I will, if I see people looking a bit, bored or going to the smoking area or whatever, I will, just go for the track that I know is going to bring everyone in. I think everybody's guilty of that. But I know for sure when I DJ, I really do try to throw it out there as far as I can and try to keep people interested in a way that isn't linear. I want people to be like, what is this that I'm hearing and how is it going in with this?
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, I think because people maybe know me for it, a lot of the time it does work for me. But yeah, DJing.
So do you think that kind of feeds into your production then? And I mean, how do they cross over?
Yeah, they used to cross over a lot. I 100% used to make like tracks 100 like straight for the dance floor. But nowadays they don't really cross over. There's not an actual crossover in the process. It's like I will make a tune and I'll be like, okay, this is one for DJs and for the dance floor, or this is one for not. And rarely do they like cross, which is kind of sad in a way. And I think it's hard to do both really well.
Do you think the kind of like the concepts crossover, in the sense of the way that you inject your own musical character into it? That
for sure will always be there. I mean, I've got an approach to how I, do pretty much everything.
Yeah. So would you like
Sorry, go on.
So would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Like I said originally, so it can start with me, like, just being bored and messing around with the track, and then that triggers an emotional response, or the other way round. And I think from a technical viewpoint, I have it usually will start with, I'll make a chord pattern, or I'll hear a sample somewhere, and maybe I won't sample it, but it will make me think of something else that I could do similar. Which is unlike, I suppose, like a lot of electronic producers tend to start with the drums, whereas I actually rarely do.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you think those different approaches to starting points affects the rest of the creative process?
Hugely, I think. Because for sure, I've been in studios and stuff, and been around a lot of different types of producers as well, who do different genres. And I think when you have a rhythm guiding you, that definitely lends itself more to dance music, because that is, the core. But I mean, back when I used to make like stuff straight for the dance floor, I would tend to go for drums first.
Yeah.
yeah, I think when you go from the starting point of like texture and atmosphere, and then build the more solid rhythmic elements and the bass and things around that, it makes it a bit more headsy and, you know, a bit more emotional, and yeah.
So I guess, you know, these kind of starting points, they sort of guide the ways in which we focus and think about what we're doing, right? Yeah. And do you sort of play your own tunes when you DJ, or I mean, how is it to see the kind of relationships between watching an audience react to it and how you felt when you were making it? How does that kind of work?
Yeah, it can be crazy. Like when because I do, like I said, I do have those tracks that I make where I'm like, okay, this is a dance floor one.
Yeah.
And you know, there have been times when I've DJ'd to like quite a big crowd, and it's really nerve-wracking when you sort of play one of your own tracks in the mix, even though you know, like in yourself, like I made this for the dance floor. It's like my interpretation of dance floor response is probably different from the dance floors.
Yeah.
So you don't really know what's going to happen, but yeah, there have been some amazing times where I've played tracks of mine, and not only has there been an amazing reaction, but people have been like, rewind it and play it from the start, you know, like that's like the ultimate flattery.
Cool.
Yeah.
Have you ever found like radically different reactions that you weren't expecting?
Yeah. It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard because I guess when you're like in a dark room and there's like a sea of people, it's quite hard to see what people are actually taking from the experience. But there have been times when, you know, I've played a track of mine that's maybe a bit too, I don't know, like a bit too rhythmically complex for the dance floor. People don't know quite what to do with themselves, but they kind of stop and stare, like, and are like, what is this?
But that's in a way is a great reaction, though, isn't it?
Well, exactly. That's almost like my favourite reaction. As much as it's great to see people go mad and dance, when people look a bit confused and are like, what is this? That's one of my favourite reactions. And from a personal point, when I started going clubbing and a DJ would play that track where I was like, what is this? That's my favourite thing. Yeah.
So let's rewind just a little bit. So at the start, you told us a bit about how you got really into like film as well and kind of other forms of art. So how do you think all that kind of stuff and the music as well, how do you think that all comes together in what you do as a producer and a DJ and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it 100% comes in. Like, so yeah, when I was really young, it was funny, like going to, because I think I grew up in a really bad area, and in a sort of like, I guess, in a sort of peculiar way to sort of keep me off the streets. My mum and my uncle and that, like, pushed films and video games on me, so essentially twisted my arm into being a nerd from a young age. But so I was like 6 years old and going to school and like saying to the kids on the playground, like, have you seen Alien? Have you seen Predator? And they were just like, what? And I just remember like being in like year 3, so like 7 years old.
That is young for watching Alien and Predator, I think.
I know, it's bad, isn't it?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, you turned out alright, didn't you? So
just about, yeah. But I remember that, you know, the question in class when it was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, you know, it was like the typical kids thing, like fireman, policeman, blah, 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 astronaut. and I said I wanted to be a film director.
Yeah.
and the teachers were just like, what? So I kind of pursued that, and I remember, like, me and my friends, we got like little rubbish VC, like mini VC cameras, and made stupid little short films and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But and then I went to college and I studied film. And what started to emerge and frustrate me was I couldn't have complete creative control over everything. And it's like, you know, I wanted to be in control of what the camera was doing. I wanted to be in control of the editing. I wanted the music. I wanted to be in control of just everything. And I think you have to be a very particular kind of person to be able to control all of those elements.
Yeah.
And you have to be a bit of a dick, you know, like Stanley Kubrick or something. I don't know. So that was when I started getting further and further into music. I was already dabbling, but I was like, oh, I can create, like, essentially these entire worlds, imaginary worlds, myself, sonically. And while it may not, like, somebody might not listen to a piece of music and be like, oh wow, he's created this, like, sonic landscape with all these inhabitants and stuff, but when I listen back to it, that's what I hear, and that's, you know, satisfying for me.
Yeah, the last time we spoke, you mentioned something about collaboration and how you were kind of finding that, or how you've previously found that a little bit tricky, but you're sort of working on it. How's that process going?
Yeah, it's going pretty well, actually. Like, on my next album, like, long play album that's coming out, there's quite a few collaborations on it. And they worked out really well, and it's just sort of, I think you just need to surround yourself with people, or work with people you have 100% faith in, and you, like, 100% love what they do themselves. Because I know when I've done a few collaborations, but when I've tried to collaborate with other producers in the past, it's just been this massive clash of ideas, and I'm also very sensitive to the fact that they have a voice that they want to shine through as well. And I don't want to, you know, be the one that fucks it all up. But it has, like, the process recently has been really good, because I know now the people that I completely trust, and, you know, they trust me back.
So these collaborations you've been working on, do you want to kind of break one of them down? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I mean, a perfect one is with Emma. And what's really interesting is how it ended up coming together, because we had a like, me and Emma have made tracks before. Like, when I lived in London, she came round and we made some tracks. But this is different because we live so far apart now, and that's always sort of a hard one, you know, when you say to somebody, oh, send me the parts and I'll send you my parts back, and it's disconnected and quite difficult. But with Emma, it was great, because she went away and she played these parts and she sent them to me, and, like, me and Emma talk quite a lot, and we get quite deep about, like, the state of the scene and how we feel about music and art and creativity and stuff. And we got into this conversation where we were talking about, you know, like, the public perception of normality, and that triggered this thought of, I don't know if you've seen the film Stepford Wives.
No, I don't think I have.
Okay,
I think I know about it. I'm not sure if I've seen it.
Yeah, so I mean, it hasn't aged very well.
Do you want to just explain it for anyone who hasn't seen it?
Yes, it's from, like, the mid 70s, and it's about this like, perfect sort of idyllic society that these husbands move their sort of trophy wives to. In a sort of way to control their wives even more. they start replacing their wives with robots, which it sounds absolutely ludicrous. But when you think about like that idea of like middle class perfection, and like, I don't know, I can just see some of the friends that I've grown up with becoming Stepford wives, you know.
So is that something that you've consciously tried to keep yourself away from?
Very much so. Yeah. I really wouldn't want to become, you know, somebody going through the motions, as it were. But yeah, so me and Emma were talking about this, and she really loves Stepford Wives as well. And I was like, perfect, we've got like a theme now. And like I sampled like choice bits of dialogue from the film that are really sort of pertinent to its like underlying message of, you know, I don't want to be part of that society and so on. So what has happened in this collaboration, outside of the technical elements of us, you know, doing the drums and the synths and everything, is we've like interpolated this sort of, I don't know, I'm uncomfortable with the term political, but this sort of social message into it. And it's really cool when that can happen, and that can only happen, I think, when you're on a certain level of connection with another person.
So that's obviously a really important, it's that communication, right? And know it kind of almost like subconsciously kind of knowing that you both exactly get where each other are coming from and how your creative personalities kind of interlink, right?
100%. So people like that are hard to come by, to be honest.
So just overall then, just to kind of wrap up, are there any kind of concluding thoughts that you might have just on the subject generally of you know, creativity, and very broadly speaking how you see it and how it influences you? You know, what are your, well, what thoughts do you have on that we maybe haven't covered that you'd like to share?
I think I suppose we kind of covered it. Well, no, I mean, like I said at the start, how I feel like it's a form of therapy for me. And I know because I worked for 2 years in mental health for the NHS, and what I didn't see a lot of in terms of what was being offered to people who were suffering with depression and anxiety and things was like access to creativity and like just general creative access, no matter how that came. It was all it was shockingly black and white, like, oh, you can either be put on these drugs or you can have talking therapy. And it's like, to get creative sort of therapies, you had to find this weird roundabout way, and you had to get these recommendations, and you had to be of like a really high level of severity. And I think that's so bad. And I think I would like to see, you know, a progression in society where there was more access to creativity for people, especially for people suffering with, you know, what people call low-level mental health problems, like anxiety and depression. Because it helps so much. I don't think people realise how much it helps. So I think that's like my strong view on creativity. It should be pushed and sort of enhanced on us.
And kind of linked with, I mean, obviously the links between creative pursuits and mental health are pretty kind of well established, but it's perhaps about pushing those connections a little bit more publicly, right, and opening them up a bit more.
And I mean, what I've seen a lot of, which is definitely a good thing, but also a bit like that's not the whole story, is there's a lot of, you know, help and a lot of information out there for the reverse, you know, of people who are artists or performers or whatever who are suffering with mental health problems. there's a lot of outreach for that.
Not that that's a stereotype or anything, of course.
Oh yeah, you know, yeah, of course.
It's a little bit chicken and egg, I guess, isn't it?
Exactly. It's I think that's the thing, and I think you have to. I think you've got to present both, like, the same way. In a way,
yeah.
And I know that's hard.
I get you, yeah.
Yeah.
And that seems like a good place to wrap up. So thanks once again to my guest, Zach Brashill. So Zach, if people want to go and find out a bit more about you and catch up with some of your music and DJing and stuff, where can they look?
Yeah, so I've got all of the, like, you know, official avenues. I've got I think they're all called, like, Etch official.
Yeah.
So SoundCloud, Bandcamp.
Yeah. I'll put links in with the podcast.
Yeah, cool. And I've got a radio show on the second Wednesday of every month on Bellamy Radio, and that's called Disconnecting the Dots, and that's basically where I just sort of play what I want.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again for your time, Zach. I've been Nick Cook. This has been the Creativity Podcast. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, goodbye.